It's pretty easy. A little pop-up will come up afterwards and give you the file.
Cool.
Okay.
It'll be live.
It's live?
Yep.
Okay. So for anyone just watching now, I've been walking Scott through a little bit of a demo of the package stage, and we were just talking about what are our North Stars for the package stage and who are our users. And we were just talking through the developers owning the code and other dependencies, needing reliability and consistency. And now we're talking about the system administrators who are really own the implementation and management, and they need tools to optimize and lower the cost of storage. This is really impactful for GitLab.com. The container registry for GitLab.com is costing us something like almost $40,000 a month right now because we don't have the ability to run garbage collection in real time. For our customers, there's ways around this a little bit. They can run garbage collection. They could put their instance into downtime because it might be easier for a company to find a few hours to run garbage collection. But for GitLab, we don't have that luxury. So that's a major problem. Okay. And the system administrators really want group and instance level visibility. They don't want to have to go into each project and see which dependencies or which images are there. They want the ability to manage everything from zoomed out 10,000 feet. Any questions so far? We're about to get into the demo.
Yeah, good to go.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to cover today is on the container registry. I'll show you how to enable the container registry at the project level. I'll show you how to view the images and tags that are in a given container registry. I'll quickly touch on how I did authorization. Actually, for the Docker, it's really simple. It's just your username and login. And then we'll build and push a new image. We'll run an application using that image that hosted on using the GitLab container registry, and then I'll just show you how we would use CI to create and update an image.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. So the first one, okay. So here's my container registry project. It's already enabled, but if I wanted to, I would just go to. By the way, this setting is set to default to on. So unless an administrator said set the default to off for all users, it would be on. But any user can go in and see, okay, enable the container registry or disable it here. It's just a simple toggle.
Okay.
So let's say that it's enabled. Where is it? So under this packages page, I could go to the container registry. And here I could see all of my, these are the images, and then these are all the tags that are associated with that image. So a little bit of Docker context. A container is the running version of an image. An image is the non-running version, and a tag is a specific version of that given image. So a tag could have something like latest, or it could be tagged with, I was in a little bit of I just watched Spaceballs with my nephew, so I was naming some of them after some of the Spaceballs characters. But yeah, like here, I'm just naming these with various tags. What our users do typically is when they build images from CI pipelines, they use the short commit SHA to tag their images, or they use this latest tag as another avenue that we see them going. Okay. So from this UI, I could delete these. I could delete these from the UI. Now we mentioned a little bit earlier, what are some of the UI, they want a better UI. Well, there's really no way for me to sort these. So you could see that being a problem. There's no way for me to search for any of these. So that especially for users that are building many images, discovery is a real problem. And then there are
reasons why a customer would have a bunch of images. Why are they doing that?
Yeah, actually, so let me pull up an example of that. This is GitLab's version. This is their CNG project, and this includes all of the different images that are required to build GitLab.com. And so these are all the different dependencies, and these get built automatically. So every time GitLab's doing a release, they'll go in and they'll update these images and make sure that they're ready for the snapshot at release.
Okay.
But really, essentially, what's happening in any given image or tag is, like, if I pull up this Docker file, this is basically saying pull from this Docker image, set the working directory. You're basically defining, in the requirements txt, it's like I need Flask and Redis in order to run my project. And then the Docker file will say, okay, go get those requirements and create an image with all of those things in it.
Okay.
So I built, in this case, a simple application that will just basically say, hello, it's Tim, and it'll show what host we're on and in a web browser.
Okay.
So the first thing I want to do is create a new Docker image. So to do this, it really follows the Docker client commands. So there's nothing unique to GitLab about here. You would do the same thing if you were on JFrog or Microsoft, except this URL would be different. So I'm going to build this image. Oops. And it's done. That's nice. So I just built this image called that's pointing to container registry examples, the container registry one, and then it's tagged with yogurt and upside. And the next thing I would want to do is push that image so it actually shows up in my GitLab registry.
Okay.
So I'm going to do that, and now this may take just a second. Okay, so now if I go back to this project, we should see under this yogurt tag, there should be a net new one called upside. Here it is.
Cool.
Cool. So now we built it, we pushed it. The next thing to do will be to actually run it. And again, this is all leveraged using the Docker client. So I'm not doing anything too fancy here.
Okay.
Okay, so now this image is running, and I could show you it running by going to localhost. Hello, it's Tim, and then here's the host name. So if I were to go to, oops, let's open a new tab and do Docker container ls. So here's my running containers, and you could see the name F6AE 581067, and that's the host that's running this image. So right now, I just essentially built and pushed a new image, and now I'm running that image from GitLab and running my little application that just says, hello, it's Tim. But you could imagine the same thing could happen if you were building, let's say, GitLab, for instance. It's running on a specific and running it on a specific image.
So a container is the running image, is that what you said?
Exactly, yeah.
When it's at rest, it's called an image. When it's
exactly
running, it's a container.
And
this is we're running it on GitLab.com, or is it? And so it's on GCP underneath GitLab.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you can see that here. It's like I did this Docker container search. If I were to do Docker image search, you can see I have many images, but only one container right now. Then that shows that hierarchy. The container is the running instance of a given image.
Okay. And why do people create different images? Is it load balancing? Is it to contain one app to one image? Like, what are the common reasons why you would not just put everything on one image?
Yeah, so in the old days, what we would have done instead of using an image is you would have a different virtual machine set up. So you might have a virtual machine set up to run on Linux, or you might have one to set up to run on Ubuntu or Red Hat or something like that. And then that's sort of the base operating system level. And then you might have different images if you need, let's say, one case you want to use Python 2.7, and then you decide you want to upgrade and use Python 3. And so you would want to use the image you could think of as like the operating system for where your code is actually going to run.
I see. So you're upgrading, you need to run it on a separate one because the OS is effectively different.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So I'm going to kill this container. Let's see. Then I was going to show just how to do this from CI. So I was actually really surprised by this. When I started, I assumed that all engineers were going to be doing what I just did, which was build something using the command line. But actually, based on the user research, what we found is that not everybody, but the majority of use cases are building images using our CI product.
Okay.
And so the way that works is, actually, let me go back to the repository here. There are a couple of this GitLab CI YAML file. This is like the GitLab way to provide a recipe to what your pipeline will build.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of templates that we have. This happens to be the Docker template, which will say when you push to master using this image, log into Docker using the CI registry user and password, which is just my credentials, and then pull this image and then push it. So build it and push it. And then when you're building, it does the same thing, except it pushes it with this new slug. So you could think of the GitLab CI YAML file as a recipe for what you want to do in your pipeline. And people do all kinds of crazy things with this when they're building their images. In fact, do I still have that CNG?
How do you apply the template there? We can come back to that.
How do you find it?
Yeah, how do you apply a template in the first place?
Yeah, it's pretty simple, actually. So if I go to just edit this file, here you see apply a GitLab CI YAML template. And there's all these different examples. We have one for Maven, which actually I've leveraged as we'll show you as well. And there's an older one for NPM, which needs to be updated. But basically for every use case you could imagine, we have a template that can be used.
And is this in your area, or is this in the CI team on this?
That's a good question. I feel like it's use case dependent, because when I was building the one for Maven, that was within my area. But then when I was it was really unclear on who owned this as a whole. It seemed like it was use case dependent.
Shared. All right.
So if I just leave, I could just run this pipeline. Let's see. That's not what I wanted. Sorry. This should be running now. Okay, so now this is running. It may take a second. And when it's done,
there.
Well, it'll show up here. And we'll see a new latest tag that pops up as soon as that's done.
Cool. And so that's become the predominant way that someone creates an image?
Exactly. And that was surprising to me, was to hear that users are using CI to build their images programmatically. And so that really has led me to a couple of it made me think about, what do we show in this UI? Because we're not showing anything really, any integration in the UI to support that. And so I was recently thinking about the data model and what data do we need to show for the container registry. So things like, well, we have image name, we do have tags, but it could be useful to show labels, or the commit SHA, which is the unique identifier from when your last branch was updated, or the author, or actually being able to show the Docker file right next to it where you can edit it so you don't have to go back and forth.
Yeah.
So this all comes from that user research that we're doing, and we're putting together this data model and then working through some improvements that we can make to the user interface to make it more intuitive.
Did you do the the experience baseline?
No, we didn't do that yet.
Oh, okay.
Not yet. This was right before we started the process. And so now we're a little bit further along on this one. We have some other ones we're going to do for the pilot that we're working on.
Great.
Okay, so maybe next we can go to just a quick view of what's upcoming, and I'll share this presentation with you so I don't have to read through all of them.
Yep.
The big thing here that's worth calling out is the engineering team and product. We're working through how do we take the container registry from viable to complete, and beyond that to lovable.
Yep.
And there's a lot of core architecture changes that need to happen to make that done. And so this issue walks through those decision points and how we'll make those decisions. But really, it is all to get to the point that we can do things like have a data model in the UI, do things like retention and expiration policy and inline garbage collection. Those are sort of the really important issues that knowing the path here will allow us to build.
Got it. How do these specific line items tie back to the North Stars? Is there heavy?
Yeah. So let's see. A lot of the ones that we're working on now really go back to secure and accessible and performant. Okay. Because it's only focused on the container registry, but it is really focused on, is it accessible and does it work and does it work well? And right now the answer to that is there are pieces of the app that don't work very well.
Okay. Who do you compete with in this particular area?
Yeah, so our biggest competitor in the package stage for me is JFrog. They have a great product. They've been around for a long time at the enterprise level. And they do things like not only have the registries or the container registry, they also have security and vulnerability scanning. They also have things like whitelisting and blacklisting and approved packages. And they already have caching and proxying, they're all great features.
Okay.
In my opinion, well, and from what I've heard from users, they're not incredibly happy with JFrog all the time because it's very complex, because they've built a single point solution to solve every problem that they possibly could over the past 6 years.
Yeah.
So I think we have some room to improve on what they've done. And they don't exactly apply to what we do because they're just announcing CI. They recently acquired Shippable a few months ago, and they're just starting to launch CI. But we have a much more, the monolith gives us a lot of advantages. The fact that your source code and your CI and all of your dependencies live in one place gives us a lot more room to create a better experience for the user.
Does JFrog do self-hosted and SaaS, or only one?
They do both. Yeah, they have definitely an enterprise-ready product.
Okay.
And then, of course, we compete against Docker Hub, or I think CodeFresh does a really good job, but I haven't heard about them too much from sales teams at all.
Okay. So if JFrog's in place, what does the stack usually look like? What do they use side by side with it?
They probably use CI. They probably use something for CI like Jenkins or Travis.
Yeah.
They probably use GitHub or GitLab for their source code and project management type things. And then they use JFrog for vulnerability scanning and dependency creation and fetching.
Okay. Helpful. At its current state, what did you put it at? It's what category?
The container registry. It's currently viable. It's being used, and people, when I ask users what, especially in the internal users, they say they like it. It works. They don't like the UI. They don't like certain aspects of it. But we can't get to complete without having this inline garbage collection, without having a retention and expiration policy, without improving the UI and expanding on the data model. I think that gets us to complete. To get to lovable, I think then we have to expand support for other container types like OCI, or support Quay instead of just Docker. And then I think there's some other work that can be done around how a user navigates through all of these things.
Okay. Do you have a sense for the percentage of the customer base that uses it?
No, we don't have that data, unfortunately. I wish that I did have an answer to that, but I don't.
And do you get an anecdotal sense for, like, we've got .com customers, we have self-hosted, you have the range of small to big. Are there particular segments that have more of an affinity for this? Or do you see customers all over the place?
I think that it is all over the place. I think the difference is how many images are they building. So for a small team, they're probably building an image with a few tags and it updated once a month or once every few months.
Okay.
But for the large enterprise teams that are building images and tags using CI, they're the heaviest users. They're building hundreds of images a week or a month, and they're constantly making updates. They're maintaining the storage. So it, there's advantages for both, but where we really become sticky is once we can get users using CI to build their images. Yeah. And then if we can give them more power to not just build the images, but to manage all of the underlying components as well, so they could lower the cost of storage and not keep things that aren't around anymore.
So are you going after that big client profile?
Yeah, I want to satisfy the hardest demands because I think that's where that's if we could solve those, the people who are only building a few images, they're easy to satisfy because they don't really care too much about whether or not they delete an old image because they're only building so many. But if we could satisfy the needs of our large enterprise customers, then we could build something that really is valuable. And that's the direction that everything is going to go anyway. I mean, if people are using CI to build their images, they want all of the same functionality that exists for their repositories. Like if I submit a merge request, I have the option to say delete this branch once my merge request has been approved. We don't offer that same capability with the container registry, which would say like build this image, but after this branch of code gets moved to master, delete the image and the branch.
Yeah, like the button when you merge.
Exactly. So things like that could greatly improve the lives of our users and make things a lot easier.
Like that. Are there other examples of the bridge between CI and the container registry that you could imagine? You showed that page, and right now there's no reference back. Do you already have thoughts about how you might create a connection?
Yeah, let's see. I can hand. So here's some. Let's see. Let me just pull it up. Here's an example of what CodeFresh does. I really like this. I don't like necessarily the UI and the colors and everything, but in terms of just like the data model, I think it's really valuable. So we have this, right? We have image name. We actually don't show branch in there right now. I think that's a big miss.
Yeah.
We do not show the commit, which again, I think is a big miss. We have date, but we don't have this sort of timestamp date unless you hover over it. I think that's a mistake. We could just put in the actual timestamp. And then the way that they display their tags, I think, is really interesting. So the way that we showed them, the way that we display these tags, you actually have to expand, and then you see the list of tags here. What CodeFresh does, oops, I lost it, of course. Here it is. They show you the tags in this way. That's something that could work. And then they have the commit SHA here, which I think is really valuable as well, because what I learned from the research is a lot of people are using the commit SHA to tag their specific Docker images.
What does SHA stand for? Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's like a unique identifier that gets tagged on. And then they have these actions here, like you could launch the image, you could download it, you can copy the path to it, which is really useful to be able to, like, if I want to copy the path to this image, then I could do things like when I run Docker, instead of having to remember registry, GitLab, container registry examples, I could just copy that from the UI. That's very useful.
Yeah. What are some of the other ones we support again? You ran through a Docker example. You mentioned NuGet. What are the other ones again?
Yeah, so right now, in terms of other container registries, we support Maven and NPM. We're working on Conan now. This is for a big enterprise customer that we're working with. NuGet's our most popular requested feature in the package stage. We have hundreds of upvotes for this. And then distant after that is Composer and Ruby gems. So for Ruby, and Composers for PHP. And then thinking about the Linux packages like Debian and RPM, we don't have a ton of user requests for this, but internally it's important because we build these Debian and RPM packages. Swift I have on here because GitHub announced Swift a few months ago, and we thought, well, let's just make sure we add it to our list of things that we eventually want to support.
Yeah. Where do Maven and NPM, where do those show up in the UI?
Oh yeah, I could show you how those work now. So
do all these on this page do similar things, or do they vary in?
They all do similar things. They all basically take some information. You like, here, let me show you the NPM example. So for NPM, there's always two pieces. There's how do you do authentication at the general level, and how do you map your dependencies. So the npm-rc file is sort of like my global settings for npm. And you could see here, this is where I would set what's the address of the registry. This is where I put in authorization, although I shouldn't be showing this on video right now with all my with my token wide open. And then this is where you actually say where you want to upload a package to. And then the package.json file, this is where you actually identify what is the name of the package that you want to build, what version is it, and then you could add in all of this metadata. So for example, I could, let's see, for NPM, I could update the version of the JSON file. So let's say I just bump it to 3.01.02. And then I could just run npm publish. I'll do it here. That's the wrong one. This one. So npm publish, you could think of that the same way as Docker build or Docker push. It's doing the same thing. It's basically pushing a set of dependencies that's saying, use these dependencies in your code, and pushing it to GitLab.
Okay.
So if I go to my GitLab spells project, this one, you can see all these files, and then go to packages and then list. And here you can see that I just now updated this latest package. And you could see it's that package, my spells 302 that we just updated.
Got it.
And Maven does essentially the same thing, but instead of Maven having an npm-rc file and a package.json file, they have the settings.xml as sort of your global settings. And here you could see, again, I'll hide that one part, but you could see this is where you put in your authentication information, and then for the Pom file stands for project object model, and this has, here's the dependencies that I want to install. So in this case, I'm just installing JUnit, and then I could point to use GitLab as the repository and then use it for where I'm going to push packages to is this specific project ID, and then that would allow me to do the equivalent of npm publish, and Docker build and push is Maven deploy. And then this will now deploy my packages to my Maven project eventually.
And then that pushes to us.
Exactly. And now if I go to GitLab and I go to my packages and list, I could see, let's see, just now I created my Maven metadata XML, the Pom file, and this jar file, which basically includes both of those things.
Okay. So now the app has everything it needs to run.
Exactly. And so now you could, so let's talk about how is that actually useful for a user. So for NPM, let's say that you were building this spells project, and I wanted to download that to my specific project. Well, I could do that simply by going, let's see, this one maybe. So if let's say I know you have that project, I do npm init, and what that does is just says this is an npm project.
Okay.
So I could just enter through all this. This is all the metadata you saw in the JSON file. Okay, and then I could run, what is it? Just so I don't forget. And then this will basically install the package from my npm spells project that we just built. And now it's there. And so now I have access. You built this project that this JSON file in one project, and I was able to quickly download it and fetch it and pull it into my other project. Okay. So for enterprise users, you could see how that would be valuable, because now you can say, oh, this spans across everybody. Make this available for everyone within the company.
Okay. Awesome.
Let's see.
Now the package stuff in the container, are those both managed by one team, or do you have separate teams that you work with?
Yeah, they're both managed by one. Historically, they were built by different teams, okay. But now they're all nested under the package team. And Daniel, the engineering manager, we're trying to avoid specializing where people only work on the container registry or they only work on Maven, because there may be some short-term benefits to doing that, but long-term, it creates less ability to move people around, less knowledge sharing, and more risk, because it's like the single person failure point. Cool. And so everybody's kind of chipping in and helping out. And it's funny because you keep saying, is this very different than what we do there? That's basically the realizations that we've been having between the container registry and the package registries. They're basically doing the same thing. You're pushing a thing to GitLab, and it's important that there's visibility and that you could download it and that it works with CI and all of the metadata that goes around it. So we're really working to try and imagine that data model and then try and imagine what could be the most useful for our users, regardless of what the integration is.
The look and feel should at least be similar, if not the same experience. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Daniel's a shadow for Sid on my one-on-one the other day. He sung your praises.
Oh, good. Yeah, he's great. I really appreciate him. He's been great to work with.
Nice.
So yeah, I could go into building Maven and npm pipelines, which would basically be what we saw for Docker. I could just go in and rerun or run this pipeline. Which one is this? This is for Maven. So I could run pipeline, and then I'll just do, let's say, I don't know, build. And now the pipeline's running, and once it's done, the same thing will happen. It'll just update in our list. It'll update the list of dependencies.
Okay. Great demo, Tim.
Thanks. That was actually my first customer demo I've had, really. So thanks for forcing the issue. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I love the way you prepared. It was organized. I like the deck and how that framed it up, and you clearly know your way around. I'm impressed because you're still pretty new. So nice work. Oh,
thank you so much. If you could try and send me that video, that would be helpful, because I could share it with some new people on our team as well.
Yep, we'll do. All right. Anything I didn't ask I should know?
I don't think so. I think the reality is my real goal right now is to make the container registry better, to take it to complete, and then to make the other integrations that we do for NuGet or whatever it is. I want to first, we're like carving this path with npm and Maven, and we're saying, okay, this is the core functionality. This is how it needs to work. And then once we do that, I want it to be like just cranking a wheel to add other integrations. We know what the maturity path is. We know how to do it. And there won't be any of this like, well, it works with this, but it doesn't work with this. That experience really bothers me, and I want to avoid it as much as possible.
Cool. All right. Thanks so much for taking the time.
No problem. Thanks again, Scott. I'll talk to you later.